Alright, good evening folks. You hear me fine?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming to our second Wee Alba Book Launch in Aberdeen. I'm glad to say we've been barred from the Abbot bar like we were for the University of Aberdeen last week. This just goes to show that the Abbot bar is a true seat of democracy here in Kincorth and in our historic city. The Wee Alba book is about the case for independence. It's been put together by a collection of some of Scotland's greatest independence campaigners, including tonight's guest. You may remember a previous book, called the Wee Blue Book, printed about 10 years ago in the run-up to the 2014 referendum. It was written by Stuart Campbell, the man behind the Wings Over Scotland blog. Well, this one is the Wee Alba book. The case for independence has changed since 2014. In Alba, we believe that independence is an urgent necessity for Scotland. This book puts forward a positive case for independence. We believe Power to Scotland brings more power to you. Power to Scotland will make you more wealthier. Power to Scotland will help us fight climate change, helping us play a positive and constructive role in the world. This book lays out the case for independence. I think it will answer all of your questions. At the end of the presentation, you'll all have an opportunity to ask questions, so please keep your questions until after the presentation. Before we continue, I'd like to introduce all our ALBA candidates we have here tonight. We've got Robert Reid, standing in Tillydrone. Do you want to say anything, Robert?
I am Robert Reid, standing in Tillydrone.
And we'll have Lee Wilson, from Aberdeenshire.
Standing in the Mayor's Ward in Aberdeenshire, the deep south of Aberdeenshire, as I like to refer to it.
Brian Allen from the end here.
Yeah, I'm standing for Tory Ferry Hill, and I've just been gobsmacked there that Rob didn't have us to say.
He's not been shying that mic so far, has he?
So I'll follow his lead.
So our guest speaker tonight is one of our nation's strongest campaigners for Scottish independence, a man with a passion and a resistance towards injustices and the excuses our people have had to endure over the rocky road to independence. He's never been shy to give his opinion, no matter what the party line might be. And time has proven him to be right on many occasions. A man of character, honour and determination. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll pass you on to Jim Sillars.
Can everybody hear me without the mic?
Yeah.
That's fine. The Wee Alba book, I've been asked to speak on EFTA, but before I do, this is a very valuable document. One of the things it brings out that has to be grasped by the Scottish people is that there's no such thing as the Scottish economy. We are a regional economy of England. I use England because if you say RUK, I mean basically you're talking about England, which is the largest unit inside the whole of this British Isles. What matters in an economy is who controls the monetary policy, who controls the interest rate policy, who controls the actual fiscal policy, how much a government will take in and actually how much it will give back in expenditure. All of those organs of economic management are held in London. And the two key institutions are the UK Government Treasury, headed by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and the Bank of England, headed by the Governor of the Bank of England, who gets support from the Monetary Policy Committee. And I got Jim Eadie to get Kenny McCaskill to ask a parliamentary question of the Treasury. When last was someone from Scotland a member of the Monetary Policy Committee? And of course, the answer is, can I remember? Because it really hasn't happened. And if you look at the membership of that committee that decides on the monetary policy for the whole of the UK, then you find they're all southern orientated. You know, the furthest north you can find somebody going is Bristol, which isn't really in the north of England. So the macroeconomic policy, that means that we can't control the Scottish economy. We're a regional economy, we're an adjunct of the bigger economy south of the border. And this little blue book brings that out very well indeed. Then it also addresses very sensibly the issue of setting up our own currency. And it's not daft. It explains that there will be a transition period between becoming independent and actually issuing separate Scottish currency, because it takes time to set up a new central bank, and in the meantime we use sterling. Nobody can prevent anybody in Scotland after independence continuing to use sterling. The same as Joe Biden in Washington. Can he stop you using the United States dollars if you want to use them anywhere in the world? It's one of these international currencies, so we'll use it for about the first 3 years of independence. Then it's a very honest document, this, because it discusses some of the real issues that you're going to face if you go onto the doorstep and talk to people and they begin to articulate their anxieties. For example, everybody in here who's got an insurance policy, either in the house or personally, it's in sterling. You've got a mortgage, it's in sterling. If you've got a private pension from the company you work for, it's in sterling. So folk are going to say, well, what happens to my private pension, my mortgage, if it's all in sterling? Well, they've dealt with that here. You can actually have two accounts after the 3-year transition period. You can have an account in Scottish currency, and if you want, you can have an account on sterling currency. This is fairly normal throughout the world, and therefore there's no problem with your mortgage or your insurance as time goes on. So it's done very well in that. The other issue it tackles, which I think is crucial in the doorsteps, is the border. I've often heard that people say, oh, if there's a border in the border, we've had it. Well, it deals very well with the issue that there will be a genuine border between an independent Scotland and England. But it explains very clearly that there's an agreement in the British Isles, which includes the whole of Ireland, for free travel. So if you still want to go to Blackpool for the weekend in September, there is nothing prevents you doing so. It's perfectly normal. And the way that an HGV would pass from Scotland to England and vice versa can be dealt with very, very easily by modern methods that are used. And they explain this happens in Switzerland. Switzerland is surrounded by Italy, Germany and France, 3 major markets which all crisscross through Switzerland. And if anybody's ever been to Switzerland, you'll see the traffic flows very normally because modern methods are used to monitor the trade that goes on as distinct from the people that's going on. So there are 3 major issues here that you're likely to meet on the doorstep where the wee blue book actually provides the answers. Now, I don't agree with everything in the wee blue book, because I'm a sceptic on climate change and the green movement. But again, if you want to argue the green position, then it's there. Although personally I don't see how anybody, whether in the wee blue book or out the mouth of Nicola Sturgeon or anybody else, can argue that Scotland will be a world leader in climate change when China is going to build another 300 to 400 big coal-fired power stations. I think we're not quite in that league and leading the world, but that's a personal point of view of mine. Now, I've been asked to talk about EFTA. And when we become independent, we will have to make a choice of who it is we regard as the priority for trading with. Now, for any country, particularly a small country like ours, with the resources we have, who we trade with is very important. And for example, you think of the amount of whisky that we produce in Scotland. Well, it could be argued we could consume it all ourselves, but that would be stretching reality. So we need international markets. We'll be in control of oil. We don't need to, for our own energy purposes, all the oil that's going to come out of the North Sea and out of the Cairnfield west of Shetland. We have to have trade with other people, trading our surpluses. And I'll just give you some statistics to show how important the issue of trade is. You'll maybe not get it in the doorstep, but you'll certainly get it at meetings about where are you going to trade. Now, Scotland in 2019 figures, that's before the pandemic, is probably the most best to quote from. Our total exports are £87.1 billion. A lot of jobs involved in that. The UK, mostly England, is our biggest market. Out of that 87, there's 52 billion goes south of the border. That's why this border issue is important. To the EU, it's 16.4 billion. To North America, mainly the United States, 6.7 billion. And only 3.9 billion to Asia, a market that will in fact grow. And it may surprise us, given the deindustrialisation that we suffered through the Thatcher years, that we can still export manufactured goods to the tune of 18.5 billion. And in services, professional services, insurance services, we actually export 3.7 billion. And in food and drink, which includes the fish that we catch, that comes to 6.6 billion. So these are very substantial amounts of trade that Scotland has to engage in for its own economic purposes. So where do we go? Well, England geographically will always be there, and it'll always be probably our largest foreign market. But the other markets matter as well. So we have a choice. We're a European nation. Is it the European Union, or is there an alternative to that? Now, I voted leave in the Brexit referendum, not because I was worried about immigration, because if we're going to grow, we'll need more highly skilled immigrants, but because I don't think the European Union is the kind of democratic organisation that I want to be associated with. Now, I am the original architect of the SNP policy of independence in Europe. Actually, I produced that idea when I was a Labour MP in 1975. But at that time, there was only 9 and then 12 countries in what was then the European Union. Every one of them had a huge number of vetoes, so that if something was going to be done that damaged their national interest, they could stop it happening. But as treaty after treaty after treaty has unfolded, right up to the Lisbon Treaty, and as the European Union expanded, all those vetoes have almost virtually disappeared. And what Scotland would have in the European Union, when they were all sitting round the table and what they call qualified majority voting, would be 1.1% of the vote. You also then have a commission which is not elected but calls itself the Government of Europe. Now, I prefer a democracy where if I don't like the government, I can undo that government. But we can't undo the commission because it is in fact not elected. And the final decision in the European Union is made by what they call the Council of Ministers. That's all the heads of state and government gathered together round a table. But that's done in secrecy. That's where the deals are done. But none of us have ever seen a minute coming out of those meetings, and none of us have ever heard any debates within those meetings. So that in itself is also, although they are all directly elected by their own states, when they come together, they're not directly elected by the European people. So there are, in my view, real problems about joining the European Union and transferring the sovereignty that we had just won to another organisation. Now you'll hear very often people say, oh, in Europe you share the sovereignty. Well, if you share the sovereignty, it means there has to be an independent, neutral organisation that actually uses that shared sovereignty, and that's the Commission in Brussels, which is unelected. What you actually get when, instead of shared, you get transferred. Sovereignty is transferred from the nation state to the Commission in Brussels. And if you don't believe me, go and ask the Greeks. The Greeks had a referendum, said they didn't want an austerity programme. And Brussels said, you can keep your referendum, pal, we're going to impose austerity on you. We're going to make you sell your state assets. And we're going to beggar your economy for the next 10 years. That's what happens when you share sovereignty. So I don't think that is in our interest. I can't conceive of winning sovereignty and then transferring it. The alternative is the European Free Trade Association, which is made up of Norway, Switzerland, Liechtenstein and Iceland. Switzerland has its own particular unique arrangement with the European Union. So it's Norway that we actually look at to see whether that way wouldn't be better for an independent Scotland. How much more sovereignty would we keep if we were in EFTA as opposed to joining the European Union? Well, EFTA in 1994 had an agreement with the European Union called the European Economic Area Agreement. It's an international treaty. It has 124 articles and a number of protocols, setting out the exact legal relationship between Norway, for example, and the European Union. Now, you very often hear, and people say, as a matter of fact, in 2013, Nicola Sturgeon, as Deputy First Minister, issued a document called Scotland in Europe, in which she rubbished the idea of EFTA. And she repeated the usual canards, Norway just does what it's told. And Norway has to contribute to the European budget and has no control over it. Those are both wrong. Under the EEA agreement, Norway is a sovereign state. It has its own foreign policy, and with the other EFTA countries can agree free trade agreements with all other countries in the world, and has done so more than 30 times so far. Norway, I'll give you an example, between 2000 and 2013, Norway applied 4,700 odd European laws to Norway. Every member state of the European Union in that same period applied over 52,000 laws to them, because the agreement between Norway and EFTA and the EEA is actually restricted to what the 124 articles say. Now, I'll give you an example. Brussels thought it would be a very good idea if it extended its power into the North Sea for energy purposes. In other words, Norwegian oil and gas. And the Norwegians said, no, 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 we are a sovereign country. We've read the 124 articles in the agreement. They don't comply with any of the articles in the agreement, so it will not happen. That was a sovereign decision by a state able to make that sovereign decision, which no state within the EU could possibly make on its own. Norway has more sovereignty than France, Germany, or any other country inside the European Union. So, on balance, if we want a sovereign Scotland, and we accept that if you join things like the United Nations and the World Trade Organisation, yeah, you lose a bit of sovereignty because you've got to agree with other people. We've got to make up our minds whether going into the EU or going into EFTA is the best way to harbour the maximum amount of Scottish sovereignty that I think we would want on the basis of independence. So that's the reason for going for the EFTA. Now, take this Nicola stuff about Norway just does what it's told. It used to say during the days of fact, Norway just sits and waits till the fax machine comes in and Brussels tells it what to do. That is not true. Under Article 99 and Article 100 of the EEA, and I'll just quote one of them in full. As soon as new legislation is being drawn up by the European Commission in a field which is governed by the agreement, that's the EEA, the Commission shall informally seek advice from experts from the EFTA states in the same way as it seeks advice from experts from the EU countries and for the elaboration of its proposals. Article 100. The Commission shall ensure experts of the EFTA states a wide participation as possible according to the areas concerned in the preparatory stage of draft measures to be submitted subsequently to the committees which assist the Commission in the exercise of its powers. When drawing up draft measures, the Commission shall refer to the experts of the EFTA states on the same basis as it refers to experts of the European Union. Norway is right in there from the beginning. Then there's this issue of Norway has to pay in to the EU budget and has no control over it. That is not true. Every 5 years, Norway engages in a negotiation with Brussels, which Norway will provide a sum of money for investment in the poorer areas of the EU, like Bulgaria, Romania and Greece. That's in the self-interest of Norway, because if those countries become richer, Norway has a bigger market. The money does not go into the EU budget. It goes into an office run by the Norwegians in Brussels, who operate their own grant system within the European Union. Now, if we join the European Union, and we'll be a very rich country with the oil now belonging to us, we'll be asked to contribute. But we won't be contributing to the budget of the European Union with no control over it. We will have our own Norway-type grant aid system, which we shall administer from an office in Brussels to Bulgaria and Romania and the other countries. We'll be in control of our own money. And that's, in my view, that's why we should come down in favour of EFTA being the organisation that Scotland ties itself to. Now, the Wee Book quite rightly says, if we've been in EFTA and the Scottish people decide that we'd like to leave EFTA and join the European Union, as Portugal did, then fine. That's a decision that the Scottish people will make. But it's sensible in the first instance, in my view and in the view of the Wee Blue Book, that we should in fact join EFTA first, thereby retaining all the necessary sovereignty we will need to rebuild our own economy over the next 10 to 15 years. Now, that's my view on EFTA. But before I sit down, I think I get into a lot of trouble because I said people should stop marching and start thinking. Because we have not done a great deal of thinking in Scotland since 2014. A lot of folk have done a hell of a lot of marching, but not a great deal of thinking. There's been a lot of thinking done south of the border. I think it's called the Constitutional Reform Group down in London. It's made up of people who are very, very bright. And they obviously learned lessons from 2014. And they have been seeking an answer to the Scottish question. And their answer actually is for a quasi-federal solution to the Scottish question. And in 2018, a bill was tabled in the House of Lords by a man called Lord Lisvane, former Chief Clerk of the House of Commons, so no stooge on the Constitution. It wasn't meant to become an act, but it was meant to lay the groundwork for discussion of how you could have a federal type relationship between Scotland and England. And Ben Thompson, just about over a year ago, wrote a book called Home Rule, which every independence-minded person should actually get and read. Because I think that when we come to the next referendum, and it will come, we will not be faced with the same as 2014, independence versus the status quo. We will be faced with independence versus Devo Max dressed up in federalist clothing. Where there'll be no border on the border, no problem with currency, your old age pension, no, nothing changes, except you'll get more power, and more power, and more power. And if you read Ben Thompson's book, and you go to the appendix of the powers that he is proposing for a new Scottish Parliament, they are very substantial indeed. So our argument will have to be between the value and the benefit and the importance and the power of sovereignty as opposed to even advanced devolution. And we've got to think about that now, because there's a great deal at stake for England. And this is not an anti-English diatribe by any means from me. I think my friend Ian Blackburn mishandles the English people very badly in the House of Commons. This is purely objective. Why do they want to keep us if, as they believe, we are heavily subsidised? Actually, there are very good reasons from their point of view why they want to keep us. One is defence. I think it was last November, The Economist magazine had a huge article about the importance for England's defence and NATO's defence of Scottish independence. Up until a little while ago, Russia was regarded merely as an adversary, potential adversary. It is now regarded as a definite threat, an aggressive threat. That makes Scotland even more important after Putin's attack on Ukraine, even more important than it was a couple of years ago, because we are an unsinkable aircraft carrier, and our function would be to have submarines at Faslane and aircraft at Lossiemouth in order to stop the Soviet Northern Fleet doing a Bismarck into the North Atlantic and disrupting the convoys that would have to come from North America to Europe if any conflict developed. So we suddenly have become essential. There is also another one, and that is the UK's position on the United Nations Security Council. It's not a figment of my imagination when I say that they're very anxious about what would happen if they lost Scotland, what would happen to their position on the Security Council. John Major, the former Prime Minister, in 2014 made speeches about the importance of Scotland remaining part of the United Kingdom in order that the UK seat in the Security Council wouldn't be under any threat. The Foreign Office wrote a memorandum to the Select Committee on Foreign Affairs saying our seat would come under threat if we lose Scotland. The Argentinians would be the first ones in to say, hey, this is ridiculous, how can that country remain in the Security Council when it's lost half its landmass and a key part of its population? So these are the reasons, very sound reasons. Now there's another reason, and that's North Sea oil. Now up until Putin attacked Ukraine, you never heard them talking about North Sea oil south of the border. Oh, it's a mature field. I mean, you know, it's not as important as it used to be. Now, it's the number one importance. So these are the three absolutely essential reasons why they have to hold on to it. And it means that the battle next time will be even harder than the battle last time. And if we get it between independence and devolution, and maximum devolution, it will be even harder. And we've got to think how we're going to fight that in a referendum, on the doorsteps and at public meetings. And as I say, I think we should actually, stop marching, start thinking, start discussing, and start preparing for that kind of attack that's going to come on us. My final comment, I'm a member of the SNP, so I shouldn't be asking anybody here to vote ALBA. That might get me into trouble. That folk in here have to make up their own minds about how they vote. But on the Scottish scene, we are in a state of crisis at the moment, or a state of stasis. Nothing's happening in Scotland. Nothing. Our politics, we are one of the food bank countries in the world, growing day and daily. We have about a quarter of our children living in poverty. Now, you can't have your children living in poverty and claim that you can close the attainment gap between them and the well-off. This is impossible. We have thousands of families who don't have a home. So how can you expect children in those circumstances to be able to close the attainment gap on their own? I mean, where I live in Edinburgh, at the top of Marchmont Road, there's a shop which at 6 o'clock on any night is filled with children doing extra homework on English and maths. That's for this. It's a national organisation that runs these shops. But I can tell from the school uniforms that they're wearing, they're all from well-off families. There's no such facility available to a child in a home which doesn't have a home, in which that child has a bedroom. Now, these are all major issues that we're facing internally. But if you look at Scotland in the international scene, this is where it becomes even more important that we galvanise ourselves to independence. For about 300 years, up until about 20, 40 years ago, the Atlantic axis, that's the east coast of the United States and Western Europe, dominated the world. We dominated it diplomatically, politically, economically and militarily. We could actually split Africa up with strange lines, and we had the power to do so. We could humiliate China for 100 years because we had the power to do so. We dominated the world economy. That's changed. That era is over. We're going into the century then, and probably 2 centuries, of the Indo-Pacific and the Asia-Pacific, with the rising powers of India and China and Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia and the Philippines. Where is Scotland, 5 million folk? How are we going to earn our living in that new world where there's a dynamic developing in the east? If we don't develop our own dynamic within Scotland, it won't be a matter of standing still, we'll actually go backward. My youngest grandson at Heriot Watt University sat down to have a cup of coffee with his grandpa, and he said to me, every Scot is doing electrical engineering. Every Scot in my year intends to get qualified and get out, because we can't see anything here for us. That's the position that we are in at the present time. That's why we've got to become independent. That we've got to become independent and have a new conception of ourselves and a new understanding that there's a different world from the one I was born and brought up in, where our young people in the years ahead have to earn a decent living by having an entirely different economic and social circumstance to the one today, where every Scot in his year wants to leave, not because they don't love the country, but because they see no future in it for themselves. When we talk about the campaign for independence, this is not a small matter. This is something that will determine the future of millions of our people for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Independence isn't something we would like to have. Independence is something we must have.
Thank you very much, Jim. That was a cracking speech.
That was good. That was very good.
Yeah.
Answered a lot of my questions already. I've got a lot of stuff I had to say. Well.
Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
Can I ask you a
Well,
question?
you've done it, big man.
As an SNP member, are you confident about the timeline that Nicola Sturgeon put forward for a referendum? And if you're not, when do you think you would have one?
First things first, let's get rid of Sturgeon.
This is kidology. The legal position is quite clear. The Constitution is a reserved matter. If the Scottish Government tried to go ahead with referendum legislation, first of all, it has to pass the test of the presiding officer. He has to give a certificate of competence. The present presiding officer probably couldn't care less what her legal advice is. She would probably give the certificate of competence. That then goes to the Advocate General, who was established in the 1998 Act to monitor the competence of legislation. He then goes to the Court of Session and says the Scottish Government has acted outside its powers. Now let's assume that the judges of the Court of Session have a good night the night before and get very patriotic and say, oh, we think she has it. The Advocate General and Adam Tompkins, the former MSP, who's a professor of law at Glasgow University, then goes to the Supreme Court. And the underpinning of the Supreme Court's constitutional judgments is that Parliament at Westminster is sovereign. And if anybody thinks the Supreme Court is going to overturn the Schedule 5 of the 1998 Act, which says it's reserved, then they're living in cloud cuckoo land. What Nicola has done, she's managed to take the independence movement up and down that hill since 2016, and she'll get her comeuppance when in fact she finally finds herself in legal limbo. But let's assume that I'm wrong, at the end of the day, she's going to run a referendum. All the unionists need to say is, we're not taking part. We're just going to be like Catalonian unionists. You can have your referendum, well, you're not taking part. And therefore you render it null and void. It's no value. Oh, you would win it all right, but it's got no democratic value whatsoever if there's mass abstentions by a good part, probably 50% of the population. So it's absolute kidology. There is the other alternative that used to be the case for the party, that if we won the majority of seats, that was it, we had the mandate to go and negotiate. But we're in a referendum era now, where the majority of the votes counts. So at the next Westminster election, the SNP would have to have a majority of the seats based on a majority of the votes in order to claim a mandate to negotiate independence. But this is where I come to the thinking bit. What would happen if Westminster said, that's lovely, yeah, and I hear you're no coming down, but we don't agree with you. The Department of Work and Pensions in Newcastle, you don't control that. You go and tell your pensioners they're not getting paid next month. Or somebody else says, oh, we're going to call in the mortgages. So, we have to think through various scenarios. The best one for us is to campaign until we've got 60% of the public support for independence, and then a referendum becomes impossible to deny. And already Michael Gove and the present Secretary of State have already accepted that if you're talking about 60%, then you've got a legitimacy to demand the referendum. Because if you get the referendum and you win it, then there's an acceptance that you're going to become independent. And bear in mind that we win the referendum on the Thursday night. We're not independent on the Friday morning, any more than the UK was out of the EU the day after it voted Brexit. We have to negotiate with our colleagues south of the border, which is one of the reasons I get upset when Ian Blackford goes into an anti-English diatribe. We've got to get them into a mental condition where they're happy to negotiate with us, where it's sensible to negotiate with us, because there's key issues we've got to negotiate. I mean, the Wee Blue Book refers in here, when you set up your own currency, you have to have foreign reserves. Now, we've got a problem with that. It's not in the Wee Blue Book. If we got our proportion of the UK gold and foreign reserves, it would only come to something like 17 billion. But actually, what some academics have done the research on, we need about 47 billion gold and foreign reserves in order to float a separate currency. So in the negotiations, where do we get the extra money out of the UK? Now, it can be done, but I'm not telling you something, to pick you off. This can be done because, for example, the whole of the assets of the United Kingdom, we're entitled to at least 8 to 9%. Now, I've been in the embassy in Cairo, and I can tell you, by God, that's some piece of real estate. And we would be entitled to the value of 9% of it. You go round all the embassies and the other assets. So there's a lot of thinking and to be done. One of the things, if you think back on it, what would have happened if we had won on the night of September in 2014? There'd be no brief. Nobody had a brief to negotiate. Nobody had thought, hey, what does the other side think? Because if you're going into negotiations, I learned as a young trade unionist, you had to think of what the other side's point of view was. So there's a hell of a work that needs to be done by the movement to build up towards 60%, and at the same time we're doing that, preparing ourselves for negotiations, really preparing ourselves. I met young Mary Black a couple of years ago. I had lunch with Mary, and I said to her, okay, Thursday night we win, Friday morning we'll know, but we negotiate. Where's our levers, Mary? Trident, she said. I said, well, that's certainly a lever. Trident's a lever. Where else have we got that's a lever? Had we thought about it? Now, Mary's very bright, but I think Mary's the same as everybody else. Hasn't he thought about the day you sit down, where is your negotiating brief? What do we want out of negotiations? What do they want out of negotiations we've been prepared to concede? What do we want that they must be prepared to concede? And if we're not in the position to have thought about that, they'll take the pants off us. You know, you're dealing with the British state. And the history of the British state dealing with people who were peeling off the British state is very interesting. When all the colonial countries came to negotiate in London, their bedrooms were bugged, never mind anything else, by MI5 to make sure that the British negotiators knew what was happening. So, a very simple thing. Would we go to London to negotiate every time? Or would the negotiations take place there and then up here, so that we could be absolutely sure we were very confident in, and we said in private, you know, could be kept in private and we weren't bugged. Just the simple things like that you've got to think through. And I say the movement hasn't thought about it. You know, give us the skill of the pipes, get the saltire up and march up Sucky Hall Street, and boy, you get in feeling great. Not enough.
Can I ask a question on that point, please? Well, I'm just considering why it's the movement that should be doing all this thinking rather than marching. Is this not the job for the government to be doing?
Well, they're in the best position because they have a governmental machine. But this is a civil service you're talking about. And this civil service is not a Scottish civil service. This civil service is a United Kingdom civil service. Now, there's a lot of stuff, I mean, they can do research and they can dig out. But the movement, if you take it, I mean, I said to somebody when the SNP had that, 100,000 members. In 100,000 members, there must be an enormous amount of talent and knowledge. Why don't we tap it? I think the responsibility is on the movement. The government has a role to play in providing information, but in the formulation of ideas, in negotiating and in formulating the ideas of how we create an entirely different economic model from the one we've got, that will not come from the civil service. I mean, if you read that document that I produced, the new national strategy, it's a mishmash. It's come and it's gone, nobody talks about it because it's no set any head on fire. It didn't set us off in another direction. So the movement, I think we have the responsibility. The problem with the movement is we don't have a single organisation that can gather us all together, set up the working committees, the way the working committee was set up for the Wee Alba book.
But we do actually have people working in the background. I mean, I'm one of them. And what we notice is that whenever we put anything towards government, it's just not taken on board. It seems like if they don't think about it, it's not of any use. So that's a brick wall that they're facing.
Well, we have a brick wall with the SNP. I mean, I don't dispute that for a single minute. But that shouldn't stop us creating a single organisation, and organisations like yours not contribute from the background, but contribute within committees that actually produce stuff that the whole movement agrees to. And we're not doing that. The movement, you know, some people say the movement split between SNP and ALBA. It's not, it's worse than that, it's splintered. There's SNP, there's ALBA, there's all under one banner, there's your organisation, there's another organisation. I mean, we need a single one, which says we are the independence movement. And from that, you then get the working groups and the working committees getting together to do the homework that's got to be done, which isn't being done.
Well, don't be despondent, because that work is underway.
Robert actually asked my question, and as a supplementary, Brian added to it as well. So you've answered that one, Jim. Thank you.
Sorry to take your thunder.
Now, I've got a question. Hands up in here, everybody who knows how much CO2 is in the atmosphere.
There's a hand up there.
Come on.
2%.
Nope. 0.0407% in the atmosphere.
Is that good or bad?
The atmosphere, the metric ton capacity of the atmosphere is 5 quadrillion metric tons. And a quadrillion is 1 and 50 nothings times 5. And in that atmosphere, CO2 amounts to 0.0407%. And the Supreme Court of the United States described it as a pollutant. Go and ask anybody who grows tomatoes in a greenhouse about CO2. It's a building block of life. I must tell you, I am highly sceptical, highly sceptical. We're thrashing ourselves around. We've got a Scottish government which doesn't know what to do with the fact that we have massive amounts of oil and that would make us one of the richest countries. Good God Almighty. The unionists are belabouring us. You would have a 12 billion deficit, they say. Oil is at $106 a barrel. We don't own a cupful of the stuff in Scotland. Not a cupful. All an independent Scottish government has to do is what the Arabs and everybody else has ever done. Say to the oil companies, right, there's going to be a wellhead tax. Not a tax on your profits, a wellhead tax on the value of the oil that comes out, or we're taking 30% of your company. And your 12 billion would be a bagatelle.
And they're still be happy.
Yeah, it would.
They would still be happy.
Yeah. I mean, we are in an incredible position.
What was
The
that?
SNP is scared to talk about oil. Because, oh, you know, it used to be $100 a barrel. Well, it's gone back up, but the normal price of oil has been around about 60. And that's a huge profit for the oil company. And we don't own a cupful. It's incredible that we have a nationalist government that wants to keep it in the ground. It's crazy.
I think you're touching on ALBA policy there.
I know, yeah.
When I first worked offshore, it was $16 a barrel, and it was $8 a barrel to produce it. And they were quite happy. Look what you've got now. They were producing it for $8 a barrel and selling it for $16 a barrel. That was 45 years ago when I first worked offshore. And look what they've got now. That was double the price then, so what they've got now is amazing.
Well, we're very peculiar. We're going to freeze next winter while we have energy that can heat our homes and make us wealthy.
Right?
What's Norway done with a difference between $60 a barrel and
Norway
$106.
do not have any food banks, do they?
No,
No.
There was an article in the Aberdeen Chamber of Commerce, I think it was today, 19 million a day Westminster takes in tax off the oil. And right here in Aberdeen there's people going to food banks. We've got the biggest offshore wind farm in the world. The wind is still the same price, the hydro is still the same price, and we're all being shafted with our electric and our gas.
we have been diverted by the argument of the oil taxation. And we've been diverted since the 1960s. And in fact, in 2014, and the arguments that we had in the SNP with people before then was all about the oil taxation going to London. The real money lies in the black stuff itself. That's where the real money is. The price of a barrel of oil. And we don't own it. And we're a very peculiar nation, very, very peculiar nation that can allow this to happen to us. How can you have 25% of your children living in poverty and you're one of the biggest oil producers in the world? Now, I worked in the Arab world for many years. And one of my friends was a man called Fakhri Shahab, who was the economic advisor to the Kuwaiti government. And he told me at the start of the oil industry in Kuwait and in Saudi Arabia that the Arabs knew nothing about oil at all, how to build an oil industry. And the oil companies gave the Kuwaitis 6 pence a barrel. And they didn't know they were being done because they didn't know. And then they began to build up their knowledge. And perhaps the best example is a man who became chief executive of Aramco, the Saudi Arabian, the biggest oil company in the world. And when you read his biography, there's a photograph of a young Bedouin boy this size, bare feet, just with a sackcloth on, who became a typist in Aramco, got a job as a typist. And that was the start. The Arabs, well, there's jobs for Arabs now. He ended up, as the Arabs became more and more knowledgeable, they sent people to university, and then they said to the oil company, no, we're taking 50%, and ended up, he was the chief executive, 100% ownership. We don't have that excuse. We have been a well-educated country. We have been a technically proficient country. And we've allowed all the black stuff to flow and be diverted by oil taxation. And in the meantime, we own nothing. We own nothing.
Scottish whisky.
Yeah.
We don't own Scottish whisky because it's exported from Dover, Newcastle, Hull. It's not classed as a Scottish export. Why is it not ours?
Well, even if it
I
came...
drink Scottish whisky every day, but
even if it was exported from Edinburgh, we still wouldn't get much benefit from it because Diageo doesn't pay much tax here.
no.
And the jobs we get, very few jobs in a distillery, and the other jobs we get are filling glasses, right?
No.
Now, there's two industries that those who own it couldn't do anything about it if we did an Arab on them and said, we're taking a share of your company and therefore a share of your profit, because they can't move them. Oil is one and whisky is the other. You can't take it away. So you would have to do a deal with us. So, we have resources. Sometimes folk, I've heard them all saying, well, whisky's a great Scottish resource. It's no ours. We get nothing out of it.
It's getting exported through English ports,
Yeah.
so we're getting nothing.
No, we get no. Except as the folk in Kilmarnock discovered,
Scottish export.
you don't even keep Johnny Walkers. So we've got to start being much more radical. Right? These are more important, if I may say so, without upsetting anybody in the room. than somebody being able to define what a woman is. These are the big issues that matter. If we're going to have a new Scottish economy, where are we going to get the capital to invest in the science and the universities, in the small business sector, in R&D, to put R&D into the universities, particularly for the small business sector? Where are we going to get the capital to build a motorway instead of a dualway in the A9 and improve the A96? And you're up here in the northeast. I've lived down in the south. You want to visit Stranraer and see the condition of the folk there. I went in for a haircut in Stranraer. Man cut my hair, and I said, "How much is that?" And he said, "You're an old age pensioner." I said, "Aye, £3.50. And I said, you can't be £3.50. He says, "There's no money here." I said, "Well, suppose it wasn't an old age pensioner, £5. He says, "There's no money here. The road from Ayr to Stranraer is a disgrace. The road from Stranraer to the motorway system at Dumfries is a disgrace. All needs upgraded. The railway's a single line, needs upgraded." Where are we going to get? If you go to the West Highlands, the roads in the West Highlands are a disgrace. Somebody was telling me about German folk came to visit him at Helensburgh, and they stayed the night. They were pals of his for Germany, and they gave them directions how to go north. And after about an hour and a half, the man phoned them and said, I must have gone off the wrong road. There's this twisty, bendy road here, and it's dreadful. He said, "No, that's the main road you're on."
Yeah, but we're paying for this.
No, we're
We're paying for the big railway.
where are you going to get capital? Where are you going to get the money to invest if you don't take your share of the oil? Where are you going to get it? I don't know where you're going to get it. You can borrow it, but you've got to pay that back.
You're not allowed to borrow.
No, well, no, really, we have a lot of thinking to be done. We're correct about the need for independence. How to get it, we've got to think more carefully of the fight, the type of fight we're going to have, how we negotiate, and then how we rebuild.
So are we allowed to go marching then?
No, you can march once a year for the anniversary of the 2014 one in Edinburgh. Keep everybody happy and your spirits are good, and the rest of the days get your group.
So how do we get radical? That's what I'm asking really.
We don't get radical.
Well, it's up to this is a matter for for people involved in the political party. What's your priorities? What leadership matters. Sometimes you've got to tell folk what they don't want to hear. You've got to tell them it's time you woke up to what's happening to you. Are you content to allow children to live in poverty? Jimmy Reid put it once, very, very well, better than I could. He said, you go into a deprived working class area and you go up a street and there's a lassie up there who'll never know. She could be a ballerina. There's a boy up there, Disney Ken, that he could ever be a great scientist. And you go through that street and every one of the wains has potential, and they'll never even know they've got potential because they'll not have any ambition, because they're in a cage of poverty. And you've got to tell folk, you've got to break out of this. This is ridiculous now. Absolutely. I mean, it's a scandal on us as Scottish society they were allowed to have. Now, if we had no resources, well, we would have to buckle down some other way. But we have enormous resources. We're supposed to be the Saudi Arabia wind. And they're talking about wind farms all over the bloody place. And we get 700 million quid when they're going to make billions. I mean, we have the planning ability to say you're not getting it unless you do this. We're the safest of the family in Western Europe. Next question about it.
Yep.
And that, if you want to get 60%, you've got to be able to tell people you want 60% to get independence, to change their way of life, to guarantee that they're going to have a good way of life in that changing world that I explained to you. The Chinese and the Indians and the Vietnamese are pouring out maths and science graduates by the million. And it's maths and science that's going to determine people's ability to have a good life in the years ahead. And we don't seem to prioritise it. And that's what we've got to do. I mean, there's a story to be told, a radical story to be told. And we're not telling it.
But you said that we would need to have one organisation.
Yeah.
But we thought with one organisation, I'm sure everybody in here joined the SNP. And we all feel what's doing by SNP because of their inactivity to do something.
Well,
Like you say, we need 60% before we go for a referendum. Well, why don't the SNP, why did they not tell us that's what we need?
Well,
Instead of leading us up the hill and leading us back down again.
well, if you look at the history, the cult of personality was allowed to develop inside the SNP by the membership of the SNP.
Right.
Went along with it, you know, happy clappy at annual conference. Can anybody remember a big speech that was made from the platform of the annual conference? No. Nicola could have got up and said Mary had a little lamb and got a standing ovation. That was a condition that that party membership has allowed itself to get into. And we've got to be able to bell the cat on the SNP. I mean, I do. I mean, you know, I don't know why they tolerate me.
That's what we thought as well.
I don't know why they tolerate me.
You need to change your labour, does it?
No, I'm not going here. I mean, why should I change my membership?
No,
We'll have
change your
to.
labour leader, the SNP, but if Nicola's not going to push it, what's happening?
Well, she's not immortal, for a start. You know, it's politically immortal. But, you know, I mean, come on. The Blue Book, the ALBA book is very well done. Where's the great campaigns coming from ALBA on child poverty, on education? 1,000 of our schools haven't been inspected. Now, this is incredible.
Shocking.
I think actually you're making a very good point there.
Yeah. Big
And the experience of people in Scotland on education, partly on health, and certainly on ferries on the west coast, and I suspect shortly with the railways, has been a disaster area.
Yeah.
And people look at it and say, if this is the future of this country, no thank you. And I want to applaud you for what you've been saying here tonight, because the Treaty of Union, as far as I understand it, was a treaty between two independent countries.
That's right.
And we should not have to go cap in hand to ask for a referendum. If we get 60% of the population in agreement, then just declare UDI.
You know what?
But people are watching and they want to see concrete things happening in the health service, in education and transport, because certainly transport on the west coast is just a boor.
Right. Wait.
And the other thing, I think why we failed the last time was the whole business of currency. And Mr. Brown certainly get in there over the business of pensions by frightening the old age pensioners. All that's got to be thought out, sorted out, up front and say, it's not a question, this is the answer about how we do it.
Unless you do that, I mean, I come back to the point I was making, you're going to be up against Devo Max, and Devo Max is very attractive, because it's the easy way. You can be as patriotic as you like, you're not taking any big risks on various things. Very, very attractive, and we have to understand that. And you have to knock it down by promoting the importance of what sovereignty is. And we haven't done that at all. And
That work is being done now, the Sovereignty Research Council is doing that.
well, that's fine, hunky-dory, but there's nothing come out yet.
That's a
And,
problem.
and in the meantime, what are we doing on the social issues? If somebody says to me, oh, okay, the work's been done here, and it'll all come to fruition in due course. In the meantime, children's lives are being ruined, communities are being ruined, families are being ruined, things are only happening that should happen. I mean, I look at children, where I go for a coffee in the morning, the Waynes are all going to school, and I look and I think, gee, what the hell future am I sitting here offering you? So there are huge issues before us. When I was a young socialist, I thought we would reach nirvana and it would all be lovely. You'd always think that was the state at the moment. But nobody needs to stir the pot anywhere at the moment. Now, everybody's very good at knocking political spots off each other as if they were at a sort of Oxford and Cambridge debate. But where's the big issues?
You've got big issues there. You've got what we're trying to turn around. We've started the work.
Well, I'm not laying it all on Alba, by the way, by any manner of means. I'm not laying it, Alba's no managing. I understand perhaps better than most how difficult it is to set up a party that breaks away, from a big organisation. But there is.
Oh, I totally agree.
There is
Absolutely.
opportunities there for a party that can start talking to folk about real radical change, fundamental change in the powers of society. Now look at the land issue. We've been bought off on the basis that some of the local communities in the Crofton area can buy their own land. Yeah, but what about the big stuff? What about the Emir of Dubai, who owns huge estates in Scotland that he uses as a toy? Is that the proper use of land?
No.
There was a tenant farmer who didn't get the tenant he was after a fortnight ago because a hedge fund company bought the land to plant trees so they get carbon credits they can trade in the international market. Is that the way we want our land to be used? I mean, I can't think of any issue facing the Scottish people at the moment where there is not a radical solution to their position. And at the moment, folk don't think anybody's got anything to offer them. Nobody is saying it. Nobody's saying, I'll change it for you. You come with me. Give me your power and I'll change it. It's not happening.
The radical solution is independence. That's the radical solution.
No. Before you get folks switched on to independence, you've got to get them on your side because you are on their side. Look, I'm for independence. I can't get it next week, I can't get it next year, but in the meantime I want change for the folk whom I come from. I'm working class and I'm watching the working class is disfranchised. Where are the working class folk in the Scottish Parliament? We are missing.
So what you're really saying is, how do you preach to the converted?
That's right. That's how you preach to converted.
Exactly. Can I ask you a question about defence? Because whatever you think of what's going on in Eastern Europe at the moment is ghastly. It's absolutely ghastly. But what's your thoughts on future defence for Scotland? Because that is another important aspect that nobody seems to be engaging with. They all say, get rid of this, get rid of that, but what actual fact should be happening there, do you think?
This is where I depart from the ALBA book. I don't think it's realistic. I think one of the slogans we'll be faced with next time because of Putin's action, and I put it to my friend from the SNP in Glasgow, I said, how are you going to answer the next one is not just better together, but better and safer together. Better and safer together.
That's a good one.
You know, we're going to get faced with that one. And you notice the Defence Secretary, Ben's not, he used to be an MSP, Ben. Ben's not stupid. He's already talking about the defence issue, puts into question Scottish independence for the reasons I explained. But now you quite easily go from you're a unionist, British state, saying to folk in Scotland, who'll protect you? Who'll protect NATO? Who'll protect Western Europe if the Russians can get right past you? Are you going to do it? Are you going to be a member of NATO? And you say, oh, NATO, we're members of NATO, but you want to get rid of its nuclear weapon off the Clyde. What if in the negotiations somebody said to me, okay, you're that much short in your share of foreign currency. Give me a 20-year lease on fast lane and I'll make up the difference. What am I to say as a Scottish negotiator? And by the way, we're in England's sphere of influence, always have been, always will be because of disparities in size, and we're in America's sphere of influence. And the Yanks put pressure on us. And what are we going to, we're 5 million people, we're not the giants. And we're negotiating our independence, and there's the Americans saying, you're important to NATO. They use fast lane, by the way, not just the nuclear weapon submarines, and they probably bring nuclear weapon submarines in. What are we going to say? What would you say then? If that was put to you across the table, your shortfalls, 20 billion, give us a long lease. Or your rhetoric, no. I mean, I've heard Alec make the speech time after time, and it gets great applause. We're all on our feet, yeah, we don't want it. What would you do if that was the proposition? That's the realities that we're going to face. No? The European Union people are now looking at us in defence terms differently than they did before the 24th of February.
Lisa?
I've got a question for you, Jim. We've got 3 for councillors, candidates, that's the word, not yet councillors, standing in Aberdeen here tonight. What advice would you give them about going into a life involved in local politics and party politics?
I've been a local councillor, and I think it's a great public service because in many ways local government is more important to the people on a day-to-day basis than national government, because local government do things that happen to you on a day-to-day basis, and so you're much actually closer to being able to improve people's lives. And so that I see that as the fundamental public service that you can give. If I were becoming a local councillor, I would start agitating at national level among local government people all over the place, irrespective of their politics, for a greater amount of power to local government than we have at the present time, because the Scottish government has been a very centralising force. I mean, one of the first things I would do would be to break up a single police organisation in Scotland on civil liberties grounds alone. A single police force headed by a single person, on civil liberties grounds. It should never have happened in the first place. Because if the government in power buys the police, then your law and order and decency have gone. And what we've seen with the centralisation is that the SNP government actually has bought civic society in Scotland. There are very few people who are not, very few in the third economy, who are not reliant upon government funding. I was at a free speech meeting in Edinburgh on Thursday night, and afterwards a woman came up to me and said to me that she has been on the board of a small charity for many years, but was told privately there'd be no government money coming as long as she was on the board, because her views do not, comply with the ones that are now standard in the Scottish government. So there's things that local government people will enjoy doing that are useful, but wider things that you tell me now. I mean, 20 years ago, there were major figures in Scottish local government who could take on central government. I live in Edinburgh. I don't know the name of the Lord Provost of Edinburgh. And I'm not alone. I've been sitting in coffee shops saying, do you ken the name of the Lord Provost? No. Lord Provost of Glasgow, name, he's got a clue. It used to be these were major figures who could speak for Scotland outside of Edinburgh, outside of Glasgow, outside of Aberdeen. Now, we don't have them because local government's lost power. So if I was a local councillor, I'd go in there and I would start agitating that the national organisation starts demanding to meet ministers, demanding further powers sent back to local government. But one area where we have a difficulty, and this is a local government responsibility, is education. We have 32 education authorities in Scotland. 32. 32 directors of education or heads of schools and the bureaucracy that goes with it. 32 times. There's about 50% of the money allocated for education that never ever gets actually near the schools. I mean, what you can do in local government, you can create joint boards of local government. We used to do that for the fire service, for example. Grampian used to have a Grampian fire service. Used to have a South West of Scotland fire service. These are joint boards. Local authorities all have appointments on them, but you've only one director of education. You've only 2 deputies, and you've only one bureaucracy. So there are areas where we are failing in education, where local councillors can actually do something about it, even without the Scottish government having any say in it whatsoever.
Hi Jim, I want to ask a question about social justice, and particularly your experience. You mentioned in the 70s when you were in the Labour Party and an active socialist and a firebrand. But looking to today, in particular employment law and industrial relations, I'm specifically thinking about the recent actions of P&O Ferries, where a boss went on one of that things on a Zoom call and sacked 800 workers on the spot immediately. Forget the duty to consult, forget the law. 800 of you, you're sacked on the spot, you're out. He then has the audacity to appear at a committee in Westminster in front of politicians who say to him, what do you think you've done? You broke the law. He leans back in his chair and says, I know I broke the law. I knew in advance I was breaking the law, and given the same set of circumstances, I'd do exactly the same thing again. Now, what sort of society are we living in where an employer can do that to any group of workers? So I'd be interested to know how you see that situation developing, whether employment law becomes devolved or under independent Scotland, where the role will be for the trade union movement and workers' rights. And at the STUC Congress at the beginning of the week, people are speaking about the oil industry and BP. A quote had come from BP from the top that BP has now made so much profit and has got so much money, it's actually awash with money. And the quote was, we're awash with money and we don't know what to do with it. So where's, as you referred to, radicalism or guts and determination, where's the determination for government to say to BP and the other huge oil companies and the other companies who are sitting on stacks of money and not investing it, we're going to take that money off you and we're going to distribute it to the people who don't have the money, who can't afford the gas and electricity bills, who are going to food banks. So I'd be interested to know what their views are.
Well, we'll not get a hold of the oil unless we're independent. I mean, that's pretty clear. There's no way either a Labour government or a Tory government or any other government at Westminster is going to demand public participation in the oil industry in the North Sea. It's not going to happen. Independent, I believe it's a must. I do not see how it's possible to reconstruct the economy without tapping the wealth in the North Sea. Now, I'm not talking about nationalising it, because actually we don't have enough experience to nationalise it. We knew about shipbuilding. When I say we, there was a corpus of knowledge about shipbuilding, about steel making, about how to run a railway. But the North Sea, there's 60,000 people maybe work in the North Sea, but they arrive back and land in scatter. So we haven't built up the knowledge that said we can nationalise that and we can run it. So what we've got to say is we're having a share of it. Now, what you negotiate the share, 15, 30%, I'm not sure, but you'd obviously do your homework. But that's what you say, you lay it down. That's what it's going to be. And you aim over time to get 50%, but you've then got cash. But on employment law, this is another area where we, as a movement, it's an open desert for us. We don't talk about employment law, but employment law is a crucial part of the economic organs that you need to rebuild the economy, and that's to look after workers. And it's we need a difficult time just now. It's not like when I was young, when you had the pits and you had the steelwork. It was easy to organise. At the moment, the trade union movement is actually a public service movement. It's easy to organise in the civil service. It's easy to organise a hospital for everybody who works in the hospital. How do you organise a McDonald's and the gig economy? Well, the only one way you can do that is actually having a law when we're independent that says the trade unions have the right to go in and talk to workers, have the right to enrol them, and have the right thereupon to negotiate in law. And there's nothing the employer can do about that. That's one thing we should in fact do. But also we need independent trade unions. One of the things that appalled me about the STUC was Nicola telling them that she's given them money. I don't believe the Scottish TUC, and I'm an ex-official of the organisation, I don't believe the trade unions should take any money from any government, even one that they like. No, you take your money, you're compromised. We have to have an independent trade union movement that says we're going to talk to you independently. We owe you nothing. These are our claims on behalf of working class people. That's an area where the independence movement never goes into. And yet, if you're going to do away with 0-hour contracts and young folk paid at minimum wages, only organisation among the workers is going to alter that. At the moment, the labour situation looks like it's altering it because they can't get labour. But as soon as that changes, we're back. One of the fundamentals that neither the socialist movement nor the trade union movement are putting out to ordinary working class people is this: you have to sell your labour in order to live. You're no better in a capitalist labour market than a can of beans on a supermarket shelf. If I don't want that can, I pass it by and it stays there. If I don't want your labour, you've had it, pal. We've got to be able to get over fundamental principles like that seem to have been lost. I went for an examination at a hospital and the nurse hodged her on. And so to make sure that the lassie wasn't embarrassed, I asked her if she was in a trade union, and she was a trade unionist, a woman about 45, married woman. And I said to her, do you know you've got to sell your labour? She had never thought about it. And I said, see the consultant, who's doing the various things to me, he's selling his labour the same as you, no different. You might call him a consultant, he's got to sell his labour. So the conditions of selling your labour determine what kind of lifestyle you're going to have. It's so fundamental. But the trade union movement doesn't preach it any longer. And so, there's independence. Without independence, you're not going to get out and out of a standard Labour government in terms of alterations to working practices. It'll have to be independence, and that's another reason to go to working folk and say, and to get trade unionists lined up on that. I mean, one of my complaints in the SNP is that they claim to have 15,000 trade union group. They've produced nothing. I mean, I looked up the last conference agenda and the one before that, absolutely nothing from the trade union group. I mean, what the hell are they doing?
I was maybe going to come back to the issue about local government. I'm a councillor in Aberdeenshire. And one of the major issues we face over the coming years is the funding of local government. And if we don't address it, then the situation, well, in terms of the services that we provide in local government, is becoming completely unsustainable. Reforming the council tax or reforming how we fund local government has been proverbially kicked down the can for a number of years. And it seems to me there's a consensus to remove the council tax, but that's where the consensus ends. There isn't an agreement as to what replaces it. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Well, the one green policy I do agree with, and it was produced by Andy Whiteman, of course is no longer in the Green Party, is the land value tax. That is probably the best, because even now, a local income tax, we are not a high income economy. That's the fact of life. When you talk about folk being in poverty, you're talking about folk who are working being in poverty. So your taxation base for a local income tax isn't actually very wide and deep. But land value can be altered. There's lots of folk with huge lands who don't pay a single thing to the community, but use their roads and their education system and their social system. So you go for a land value tax. And that brings in the money to local authorities. And it's actually Andy Whiteman did all the calculations necessary. Andy's a very, very able guy, did all the calculations necessary. But you've got to be able to take on the landowner class if you're going to bring in a land value tax. Yeah. And land's a big issue in Scotland, so why not put that up front to people? Because if local government continues in the way it's done, under statute, local governments are required to do this. But if local governments don't have the money, how can they fulfill their statutory duties? But we're in a bad way here. And we're in a local government election, and the SNP sends me a leaflet in Edinburgh telling me that Boris Johnson's a liar. Well, I know that Boris Johnson's a liar. But what else? I mean, this local election has hardly taken off on local election issues, has it?
Is that something we can do as a council, a local council?
You can start agitating. What's the organisation that covers Scottish local government? COSLA. Start getting folk onto COSLA and start agitating in COSLA and produce a land. Get Andy Whiteman, borrow Andy's ideas, produce a land value tax and demand that COSLA starts demanding the government act upon it. Put them in the spot. Local government up until now has sort of put their hands up and said, you're not treating us fairly. It's time that local government started attacking central government in a way that they couldn't reply.
You can't put land in a Panama bank account either.
Right? And you can't move it.
Anybody else got a question? Somebody?
Yeah, I would just wonder if the panel, not just yourself, John, but if the panel had any thoughts on just one of the things essentially I think you raised, Jim, is how really unambitious the socialist movement is, the trade union movement is, and the independence movement is about actually tackling issues of social justice, about things that, I mean, I've had this discussion with yourself, Charlie. If I was a candidate in Tory, for example, one of the things I'd be jumping up and doing and banging the drum about would be, okay, why is it that that community is always the one that has to carry the can for the rest of the city of Aberdeen? If you want a new harbour, I'll stick it in Tory. If you want an incinerator, I'll stick it in Tory. If you want a transitional energy zone, we'll use up the last green space in Tory. You know, again, it's this almost lack of political ambition that concerns me. I'm not putting ALBA in the spot here. I think this is across the whole Scottish society, if you will. So it's interesting to hear people's thoughts.
Do you want to answer that, Brian? Because you were at Hustings just yesterday, weren't you?
Well, it's, I mean, just in case anybody doesn't know, that's not a theoretical question, that is actually what's happening in Tory. And I know some of the guys I've been talking to are really, well, pretty pissed off now, and they want to see some action. So, I'm hoping to get into, well, let's go back a wee bit. I've done a lot of volunteering in Tory. I've moved into Cove just next door, but I still do a lot of volunteering. And for me, getting onto council is an extension of the volunteering work to make things better for the area. Because I've seen it kind of downtrodden quite a bit, and I noticed that things get dumped there. You know, from an old tip, and then the sewage works, and then that incinerator that's going to be start burning stuff soon, which isn't actually in the award, to be honest. That's in Cove, but it's right next door to them. You know? So there is a lot of things there that need to work. But one of the main things that concerns me is the lack of democracy. That a lot of that things are being put under the radar, and kind of they've been scheming to get in there and telling and giving promises that are not going to happen. Like, oh, there's going to be cruise ships coming in there. Well, it seems like the harbour's not deep enough for it, you know. And who's going to want to come into a harbour where the stink is coming out of the sewage works, you know? And then they'll just get driven through Tory, increase the traffic load, increase the fumes there and all the rest of it. So it's not going to really improve the lives of people in Tory. So the way that they've done that, I think, has been scurrilous. And part of my job, if I get elected, is to find out what's actually happened, so then we can take recourse. And make sure that in future things happen properly, in the proper sequence. I.e., if there's going to be a consultation done, it's done before the decision is made to go ahead. That type of thing.
I think everybody was against the incinerator. Everybody in Tory, everybody in Kincorth, Cove. Nobody wanted the incinerator, but it was just forced on us.
I voted against it.
You were a good man. And the harbour has taken away the spaces, and we've got other bits that have all been developed. There was the Loyerston Loch, was going to be, it was designated as a site of special scientific interest. And it was going to be a football stadium built across over half of it. Then the football stadium got shelved, and now it's developed into housing. And that's the only freshwater loch in the city, and nobody cares about the balance of the special site of scientific interest anymore. This seems to be a pattern, but it seems to happen in the south side of the city. And I think the people that are in power are quite happy for them to have leafy suburbs and nice spaces, but they want to take away ours. The south side of the city is one of the best places to live. You've got the coastal parks, you've got the Gramps, the Tullishill, you've got the River Dee. It's a beautiful area to live in. And to look at any threat against that will be absolutely opposed by me, with every part of my body.
I just wanted to say, I'm going to answer the question why you think there's that lack of kind of strength in councillors to stand up for their communities. I think it's because you have the wrong type of people wanting to become councillors. I think when you look at, I was at Hustings with Brian the other night, and I think, prime example, people see a councillor gig as a stepping stone to become a good job as an MSP or an MP or get a good job within a political party. And they don't really care about standards of the community. I think the SNP representatives in Tory made that example alarmingly clear. Christian Allard, who jumped at the opportunity to get an EU seat, and you could not pretend for a second that if you were still in the EU, he would be standing again in Tory as a councillor. He'd be taking that big wage packet in the EU. And the other SNP councillor, a caseworker for MP Stephen Flynn, her sights isn't on providing for the community of Tory, it's getting that next list seat as an MSP. So I think there needs to be a kind of shake-up of why people want to become councillors, and parties and the leadership of parties need to improve that kind of process of getting the right people in. And I think it's not really popular to say, but because nobody likes a politician getting paid more, but a councillor's job is a part-time wage on full-time hours. And if you want to have people that actually care about the community and want to work hard, you need to pay them correctly as well. But yeah, I think a lot of it stems from leadership and a failure to kind of act and clamp down on that kind of carpet-bagging culture, or culture where you see different positions as a stepping stone. Certainly it's something that would alter that and get people in the job that actually want to be in the job, which I think we all here stand for.
Can I maybe answer briefly the wider political question you asked about the lack of vision that has been proposed by certainly the mainstream parties? And it's quite sad at the moment that the SNP have drifted to the centre, the Labour Party have drifted to the centre. Now there's a massive gap to the left of centre in Scottish politics that I hope ALBA can fill. Now we'll see what happens after the council elections, we'll see how many councillors we elect. But I think that will dictate the future of the party, the future direction of the party. But I certainly think a left of centre vision that's not being articulated by anyone really at the moment is there for the taking, because there's a real enthusiasm for it among people in Scotland. Now, we've all been campaigning over the past few weeks in our respective wards, and the one thing I've picked up on, and this is a tragedy since 2014 incidentally, but the one thing I've picked up on is complete apathy among people. The turnout is going to be horrendous at this council election, I can guarantee that. And it's very sad that we've gone from a very highly politically charged population in 2014. And I remember Jim uses the example a lot of speaking at a public meeting to a lady who says, "After this I'm not going back to my sofa." Well, unfortunately, by the failure of our leaders, they have gone back to their sofas because we've not given them anything to inspire them or to go out and vote for them. So that's why I hope that if we make some gains in the election, we can be the more radical voice for change in Scotland.
Anybody got any last questions before we wrap up? No? Oh, Conrad?
As you can hear, I'm one of the new Scots. I'm native Polish. I came to Scotland in 2014 during referendum time. And, well, then I remember very good formatted unionist propaganda, yeah, which was addressed to the Polish community, to other minorities, other newcomers, which all this, independence scare. Yeah? That borders would be closed, currency would be not exchangeable, no right to work, etc., etc. It was written in good Polish, good Romanian, etc. It was well targeted, and well, unfortunately, it was very effective. This propaganda was very effective. A lot of our people were really scared of independence, and well, I stayed in Scotland. That's now my country, my home, and I thank you, of course, for that you are very good and friendly host for our people here. But well, I remember that after after the referendum, the only one powerful voice I remember, and I was waiting for what to do next, was your voice. I remember your book. So the only one which was the answer, what to do next, yeah? When we failed. Yeah, I tried to help as I could. I was reflecting, as an ordinary man, just taking a part in this big case. But, well, and it was 8 years ago, and apart from your questions and your answers here, apart from proposals of our friends from ALBA and our grassroots activity here, Aberdeen and our grassroots organization, there are still the same treats, the same scares. Our people are still the same disoriented. What to do next? Yeah, what is the future, and what will be the difference between independent Scotland and the United Kingdom? When I, no offense, but when I hear leadership of SNP MPs, yeah, and they say no worries of independence. Independent Scotland would be the same like the UK. Yeah. I would say, well, so what the case? What the point? How to convince people to vote for something that would be the same? Yeah, the same, unfriendly for working class, for newcomers, for new Scots. Well, we don't want to have something the same. We would like to be a part of something new. Yeah, something for everyone. For workers, for newcomers, for people from all coming from different places to live together in peace. Do you believe that in a future campaign, not only campaign for referendum, but for campaign for better Scotland, can we overcome these threats? Can we give some positive message to people of any ethnicity who believe that that's our place here?
Yeah, I do believe it's possible. But from my point of view, I couldn't dream of going into the housing schemes in the west of Scotland, where there's a huge vote there, and saying, see that national strategy produced by Nicola Sturgeon's government, that's the one you want to vote. I couldn't say that, because it's change, no change. And I also think we have to, somebody says to me, oh, it's an awful risk. You've got to say to them, look, no country has ever succeeded that wasn't prepared to take a risk on itself. Are we a first-class nation or a subservient nation? We've got to put that to folks straight to their face. Do you really believe that you are better run by someone else who doesn't owe you any malice, but doesn't really know you, doesn't really understand you, and you're happy with that? Where do we ignite the ambition among the Scottish people? That they have power, and that power is only potential power. And when it becomes real power, then you change their circumstance by the following programme. And that's where a radical programme has got to come in. And you've got to be prepared to face the sort of middle-class Scot who likes to be patriotic and probably is at Murrayfield, but is a bit afraid that the working class will take over. There's that fear. And I think you've got to say to them, well, that's your hard luck. You've been taking over us all these years and look what you've put us. It's time for the working class, which is the majority in Scotland. Because if you've got to sell your labour, basically you're working class. You've got to get their ambition ignited. And we're part of, you're all prisoners of your own history. And one of the great virtues in Scottish historical development has been our sense of egalitarianism. But there's a downside to that. We are anti-elite. If I said we're going to be an elite country, no, really like that, take the top off the thistle. But sort of contradictions in Scotland. We like Andy Murray being an elite tennis player. Celtic supporters used to go, very poorly paid ones, and saw the centre forward getting £47,000 a week because he's an elite football player. If we had an elite football team that could guarantee us in the World Cup, we'd be happy. But when it comes to being an elite society in the world, somehow or other this egalitarianism tends to hold us back. So I think we've got to have a look at ourselves in the mirror, as well as having a look at folk who control us at the present time. We are masters of our own fate. And we've got to put, the reason I would always ask people, and I disagreed with Alec on this and Swinney on this, election after election, after 1992, we never asked people to vote for independence. It was for a stronger voice in Scotland. That's not the same thing. Asking people to vote for independence, we were called fundamentalists. And the reason was quite simple. If you put people on the spot and you say to them, this vote for me, make no mistake about it, is for independence. And if you don't want it, don't vote for me. That was to build up a hard core of independence voters getting bigger and bigger and bigger at each election. We've failed to do that. This time I think we'll really have to do it. Put folk on the spot and tell them, what kind of people do you think we are?
As James, you probably expect me to say, it is a spiritual problem. And the spiritual problem is we don't believe in ourselves as a nation. And until we actually believe in ourselves, we're not going to get anywhere.
No, I think you're right. The only time I've ever faced violence in an election was a woman in Glasgow who came out and told me, we are no fit to run our own affairs. And I said to her, well, there's a difference between you and me. I am a first-class Scot. I believe I'm better at running my country than anyone else. You are a second-class Scot. And back went the fist. But she genuinely believed it.
And you should have said to her, well, it's funny, we run the British Empire for the English.
Yes. So you know, I think as well as campaigning, you've got to put folk on the spot. You've got to make them think about themselves and their responsibility, not just for themselves, but for the rain that walks past them in the road. And I don't think, you know, we've done enough of that. I think one of the problems in 2014 was that the campaign was change, no change. Because I was on platforms and there was very few people supporting the white paper. Everybody had different ideas of what we wanted to do. So that can't happen next time, because that's a sense of weakness when you get differences on the platform. So it's a big task ahead of us, but you know, it is a very noble cause that we're engaged in, and every way you see in the street, it's about their future. I'm very sorry, I will now have to go because I have a standing arrangement with a grandson. I meet him every Saturday morning in the local coffee shop and have done so for 11 years, and I can't miss tomorrow morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together.